Hello, and welcome to Learning Science by Being a Scientist. In this video, we are going to explore how and why scientists plan and carry out investigations. One of the first things we may think of when we talk about science and scientists is doing experiments. This may make you think of a bunch of people all wearing lab coats working around test tubes and beakers in a science lab somewhere. But science is so much more than that. Remember when we said that science is all about asking and answering questions? We said that you start with a question, and how questions lead to investigations, and how investigations lead to answers, which usually lead to more questions. Well, we need to add something to this. Data is what we get from the investigation that helps us construct an answer to our questions. So the simple answer to why scientists carry out investigations is to answer the questions they ask. But it is so much more than that. For scientific investigations to answer a scientific question, it needs to do certain things. Scientific investigations start off with scientifically testable questions. Remember, this means they are questions we can answer by gathering data through an investigation. Once a scientist has a scientifically testable question, she will make a prediction about what she thinks the answer will be. This is called a hypothesis. A hypothesis is only a prediction, a guess of sorts, but not just any guess. This guess is a prediction based on what the scientists think will be the most likely outcome of the investigation to answer the question. This means the scientist already has an idea about the outcome based on her research. This is why a hypothesis is sometimes called an educated guess. The scientist now needs to do a test to figure out if that prediction is correct. Another way to think of scientific investigations is to consider a fair test. A fair test is one where scientists design an investigation that changes only one thing in order to see what happens. But what does that mean? Remember when we talked about which brand of fertilizer will make a plant grow the most flowers? We would then need to learn about different brands of fertilizer in order to make the prediction about which one will have the plant grow the most flowers. So let's say that after learning about what plants need and what different fertilizers have in them, we predict that brand A will work the best because it has the best combination of nutrients the plant needs. Now we are ready to make a plan to see if that prediction is correct. So you decide to get 4 groups of plants. Groups 1, 2, and 3 each get different brands of fertilizers. Group 4 gets no fertilizer. I'll tell you why in a minute. But everything else about the plants stays the same. The water, the soil, the pot, the light, the temperature, especially the type of plant. All of these things need to stay the same. All of these things that stay the same are called controlled variables. This is what makes this a fair test. It's fair because it only changes one thing, in this case, the fertilizer, to see what will happen. Will it make the plant produce the most flowers? That one thing you change is called an independent variable. Imagine instead if you change the fertilizer and how much water and what kind of soil and how much light and the temperature you grew the plants at. How would you know which one made the plant grow the most flowers? That's the problem with changing more than one of these things at a time. You wouldn't know which of these different factors or variables made the flowers grow bigger. So why didn't Group 4 get any fertilizer? Group 4 is called a controlled group. In an investigation, this is the group that gets nothing changed so that we can compare our other groups to this one. So how does all this data help us answer our testable question? As those plants grow, we want to gather data. This means making observations and measurements. That means the scientist needs to figure out what she wants to measure to help her collect the data that she needs to get her answers. These measurements are called dependent variables. So, since our question is, which brand of fertilizer will make the plant produce the most flowers, we will want to measure how many flowers grow on each plant that we use a different brand of fertilizer with. We might also be interested in the overall health and appearance of those flowers. So we would also want to write down what we observe about how the flowers grow each day. And then we take all this data and organize it into charts and graphs. And once we have all of the data and we have organized it into charts and graphs, we are ready to figure out the answer to our question. But where does that answer come from? Well, we analyze the data to figure out which plant with which fertilizer developed the most flowers. And that gives us what we need to answer our question. But what if our prediction was wrong? By the way, It's all right if our prediction ends up being wrong. That just gives us more questions to find answers to. So there you have it. If science is all about questions, then investigations are how scientists collect data in order to figure out the answers to those questions and possibly create more questions. But don't forget, in order for scientists to be able to trust that information, the investigation needs to be a fair test. Thanks for watching. Come back soon and watch more videos about what scientists do. And remember, the best way to learn science is to be a scientist, and that means doing what scientists do.